Welcome to the River Lit podcast, the podcast to accompany Medway River Lit, a literary festival for Medway.
Won't you come down, won't you come down, won't you come down to Chatham Town? Oh, won't you come down, won't you come down, won't you come down to Chatham Town?
Hello, I'm BFH, poet and man in the library.
Hi, I'm Sam Hall, playwright turned graphic novelist.
I'm AMJ. I like writing lists and glimmer questing.
And we are the Medway River Lit team. We're Wordsmithery, a literary organisation working in Medway for the past 10 years. Last year, we were commissioned by Medway Council to produce a new literary festival, Medway River Lit. This year, we're delighted to be bringing it back with a focus on the climate and the things that are happening to it.
In this podcast, we'll be previewing writers and books who are coming to Medway River Lit in November. We'll also be giving a little writing tip at the beginning of the podcast and a moment of greenery, our tip on what you might be able to do to help the planet at the end.
Today's recycled writing tip comes courtesy of Neil Gaiman. Writing a short story is the best way to practice writing a novel.
Now, on to our guest interviews.
I'm delighted to be joined by Caitlin Davies, author of 6 novels, including the historical crime novel The Ghost of Lily Painter and several non-fiction books, including Bad Girls, The Rebels and Renegades of Holloway Prison, nominated for the prestigious Orwell Prize for political writing in 2019. So thank you for joining us today, Caitlin. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Anne-Marie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your writing journey?
Yeah, I was interested in writing from a very, very young age.
You always assume people who write are going to be voracious readers. Has this always been the case for you?
It is, yeah, that is true. I have always loved reading, and I was lucky because I grew up in a home full of books.
So do you have any tips for aspiring writers? So I often hear that the more you can read, the better, but I do appreciate there's got to be a balance between actually giving yourself opportunity to do writing yourself.
Well, I think, obviously as it sounds, just do it. You don't know what you can do unless you start doing it. And until you've written something, you don't know if it's any good. It's a process. You don't sit down and inspiration strikes and it all comes pouring out of you. I think taking a break is a really important thing. Once you've written something, put it away. Don't keep on working on it. Put it away and go back with fresh eyes, and then you can edit. So separate those processes and it makes it a little bit easier.
So we're absolutely delighted that you'll be coming to Medway River Lit in November and talking about your latest novel, Private Inquiries, The Secret History of Female Sleuths. Would you be able to tell me a little bit about this book, please?
Oh, I could tell you a lot about this book. I could talk for hours on this book. So it's a history of female private eyes from around the 1850s up until today, and it's looking at about a dozen women in particular, how they became private detectives, what crimes they solved, and their general struggles along the way, operating in a very macho form of work.
And so you actually trained as a private investigator. So did this actually happen before the book, after the book, during the book?
I thought, actually, I don't really know what private detectives do. I watched Charlie's Angels as a teenager, where you've got the 3 glamorous American women, rushing off to solve a murder, and they do it all in 30 minutes flat, and then they change into their bikinis and relax by the pool. And the Rockford Files, Magnum PI, it all comes from media, often American media. So I thought, I wonder what they actually do. And then I realised, in the UK, there's no set route. Anyone, if you want to be a private detective, you can set up shop tomorrow. But there are a few courses out there. And so I thought, I'll sign up and do one of these courses, and then I'll understand what professional investigators, as they're called now, what they actually do. And then I'll sort of have a better idea about how the job has changed and how people did it in the past. So I did a BTEC level 3 award, and then I did a diploma after that.
And so what first piqued your interest in private investigations, especially female private investigators, to begin with?
Well, it was coming across these references to women working undercover in department stores. And that was interesting because at the time, women weren't allowed to join the police force. So I thought these women were really pioneering in what they were doing. Let me try and find out when they started. What amazed me was how many successful women there were in the late 1920s and 1930s. That private detection was seen as one of the best paid careers that a woman could take up.
And in your opinion, what specific attributes make women such good PIs?
The first one is no one suspects us of being PIs. So if a woman, for example, is sent to serve papers to somebody's house and you open the door to a woman, particularly if it's a woman who's, I don't know, over the age of 50, 60 or whatever, we're not seen as a threat. So, people don't suspect that you are a PI, and therefore, they haven't sort of put their defences up. Also, women are ignored, especially the older we get, which is extremely useful if you're watching somebody. You don't create suspicion, so that helps as well. And then women are known for being extremely observant and paying close attention to detail.
And so do you actually have a favourite sleuth that you came across during your research?
And I think there's two women. One was Antonia Moser, and she's the earliest woman I can find to establish her own detective agency. And she started off working for an ex-CID guy that ran an agency, and they had a massive falling out, and then she set up on her own. And this is around 1888 is when she first started. And so I think she's a fascinating woman. And then my other favourite, and the one that I would hire if I needed to hire someone, is a woman called Zena Scott Archer. And she ran Scott's Detective Bureau in Liverpool. And she had an incredibly long, successful career. But outside the small world of private detection, no one's heard of her. She was elected president of the World Association of Detectives. So she was the leading British sleuth on the world stage, male or female. And yet there's been nothing about her. There's been no biographies, no TV programs, no dramas, no documentaries, no critical analysis, nothing. So Zena's a fascinating woman. I think overall she's probably my favourite.
And as well as reading from your book at Medway River Lit, can you tell us a little bit about the masterclass that you'll be holding there as well?
Yeah, so this is going to be on historical crime fiction. What we'll be looking at is, when you're writing historical novels, you really need to work on a sense of atmosphere and place. You want the reader to believe that they are in that world, whatever that world is, but you don't want to hit them over the head with, look what I found, look at all the research I've done. So it's finding the sources that are out there that can help you create that world, and then learning, looking at how you can use them.
That sounds a really fascinating masterclass, so I'll definitely be signing up for that one. I've read that you're a novelist, a non-fiction writer, a teacher, and an award-winning journalist. And I appreciate it feels a little bit like trying to choose a favourite child. But is there any one of those that particularly holds a little bit more of a space in your heart?
Oh, that's an interesting but difficult question, because I love all of those jobs, but the only reason I have that many jobs is because it's so difficult to earn a living as a writer. And so, most professional writers will be juggling several other jobs as well, because, the average income now for a professional writer in the UK is less than £10,000 a year. So that's really why I became a teacher, so that I had a so-called proper job with a regular income.
Just one last thing before we let you go, Caitlin. Would you be able to tell me what's next for you?
Well, yes, I'm writing. Having done 3 non-fiction books in a row, I'm a bit like, the amount of research, the amount of headaches, the amount of time, and the lack of money, and let me go, let's do a novel, let's see if that can be fun. Although I'd forgotten just how hard work a novel is and how you start, you've, at least with non-fiction, you've got something you're building it on, whereas fiction, you've got to make the whole thing up. But it's set in Broadstairs in 1857, and it's set in Charles Dickens' household. He was a regular visitor to Broadstairs, and he used to rent, it's now called Bleak House, but he used to rent it for months at a time. And he wrote chunks of lots of his books around Broadstairs. And because I've written so much now about female private detectives and female criminals, I wanted the release of, doing a bit of fiction. So something is stolen, a very sensitive document is stolen from Charles Dickens in 1857. And he turns to his good friend, who in reality was one of the very first private detectives in England. And he hires a young woman to move into the household undercover to work out who's stolen this document.
I really look forward to reading the finished piece of work. That sounds really interesting. So can I just say thank you for joining us today, Caitlin, and we're really looking forward to hearing you read Medway River Lit in November.
Our next interview is with A.A. Chaudhuri, who will be joining Caitlin on our Crime Saturday on the 16th of November.
So it's an absolute pleasure to be joined by the author A.A. Chaudhuri, a former city lawyer turned thriller writer. As well as contributing to the crime anthology Given in Evidence, she has written many articles and short stories for the Crime Writers Association. Her fourth psychological thriller, Under Her Roof, was released on the 13th of June 2024. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me.
So I was wondering if we could just start off by saying, could you tell us a little bit about your writing journey? Were you always interested in writing from a young age, or was it something that you came to later on in life?
No, I mean, I've always loved to sort of read and write short stories right from a young age. I think I'm an only child. So I think, I tended to bury my nose in a book. I remember reading The Magic Faraway Tree. I just read it and read it and read it. And the characters would sort of become my friends. And, I didn't have that playmate. So I think that sort of was one of the reasons I really got into stories. And then I'd write short stories as a child. I remember sort of putting them into sort of booklets and presenting them to my parents and, really proud of what I'd written. And so I loved English and I would read all sorts of genres as I grew up. But I really always loved mystery stories with a sort of mystery element. And I guess when I picked up my first John Grisham, when I was in my mid-teens, that's when I really fell in love with the crime thriller genre. But, things didn't happen. I went on to do different things. I played tennis professionally, and then I went back to my studies, and I ended up being a lawyer for 7 years in the city. But, I sort of grew disillusioned with that. It wasn't really for me in the end. It's quite a ruthless, cutthroat environment. The work wasn't creative enough for me, I suppose. And, I had this urge to do something a bit more creative. And when I was pregnant with my second child, I took that opportunity to sort of leave law and try and pursue a writing career. And luckily my husband's another boring lawyer, so he was able to pay the bills while I pursued writing. But it wasn't an easy road, that's for sure. Most writers will have a story similar to mine. I ended up, first of all, writing a couple of women's fiction novels because it was easier to kind of write those while having 2 young children, because obviously crime writing is very methodical. It takes a lot of research, all sorts of things. So I ended up self-publishing those because, I couldn't get an agent. And then I had an idea for a crime thriller story, which was based on a lawyer who gets involved with a corrupt firm. Not that I was ever working for a corrupt firm, but it still took me, from the time I started writing in 2010, it took me 5 years to get my agent. And then it took me another 3 years to get my first publishing deal. So I was basically writing for 8 years, and I wrote a book a year, basically. I came close to publishing deals, some with some very big publishers who, it was like no one said anything derogatory. Everyone said my writing was good, but it just wasn't right for them, And then I got published in 2019 by a small indie publisher called Loom Books, who took on my Kramer Carver series. So my first 2 published books were about an amateur sleuth lawyer, Maddie Kramer, who gets caught up in investigations that centre around the legal world. First one was a serial killer investigation called The Scribe, and that was followed up by The Abduction. But I suppose it was in 2021 when Hera Books, who are now part of Canelo, they picked up my first psychological thriller, which went on to become She's Mine, which is probably sort of my breakout book that really sort of helped me reach a wider audience and, you know, be invited to lovely things like this. And but I wrote that in 2017, so it took me 3 years to get that picked up as well. And since then I've gone on to write The Loyal Friend, The Final Party, and now, as you said, my 4th psychological thriller, Under Her Roof, was out just a month ago now. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, ups and downs.
Absolutely. But I mean, it sounds like you've got amazing tenacity. Is that something that comes naturally to you to stay motivated?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been quite a high achiever in everything I've done. I always like to try and do the best I can and keep trying. I think you've got to know, I know I have talent. I think as a writer, you've got to have basic talent, otherwise it's just not going to work. But I think it's very easy to get broken by the rejections. But I did, you know, I believed in myself, but I was lucky to have a very supportive agent who didn't give up on me. And I think it's important for writers out there who are just starting out to be surrounded by people that are supportive. My family was supportive, and just keep writing. I think if you keep writing, something will happen. If you have talent and you keep going, you might not be a Sunday Times bestseller, but your book will get picked up by somewhere. And I started off with a very small publisher, and now I'm with a, you know, much better publisher in terms of its scale and you know, the sort of reach I've been able to get with them. So I think it's, you just have to keep going. That's the key, I think. Keep writing. I mean, She's Mine was my 8th book that I'd written, which just goes to show that, you know, that next book can be the one. So you just need to keep going.
Absolutely. Like you say, just keep going. And the more you do, often you get better, don't you? You're honing your craft.
Definitely. It's like anything. It's like sport. The more you practice, the better you get. So I think, you know, writing is definitely a skill that you can keep practicing. And I know that my books now, they're better than when I started off in 2010, because I've learned a lot through just writing and the editing process, and you know the little tricks that you don't know when you first start off.
And so by the sounds of it, you are a very voracious reader. Do you have any current recommendations you could share with us?
Yes, I mean, I've recently finished The Garden Party by B.P. Walter. I love his books. I'd love to be able to read more, but of course I've got my own writing as well, so you have to find a balance.
And that's the difficult thing sometimes, isn't it? Where when you're really into something, actually having to ring fence your time for your own writing. Because like you say, it's one of those things that can easily slip. And just before you know it, a certain amount of time's elapsed.
Yes, that's exactly right. And if you're under contract as well, you know, you've got to start on the next book, and you've got to deliver it by a certain deadline. So, you know, that's always in the back of your head as well.
Absolutely. And so, as I was saying, we're really delighted that you'll be coming to Medway River Lit in November and talking to us about Under Her Roof. And without giving too much away, would you be able to share with us a little bit about the novel?
Yeah, I'll tell you the main premise, because I will say now that the book is full of spoilers, so I can't say too much, but I can give you the basic premise. So the book is about a struggling writer called Sebastian, and he rents a room in this sort of palatial Hampstead mansion of a wealthy, mysterious widow called Adriana Wentworth. And Seb's come to London to pursue another agenda, which he's not told anyone about, as well as to write, as well as to find a beautiful space to write. And obviously this house is vast, it's full of natural light. He thinks it's going to be the perfect place to base himself. And he takes up the room despite his misgivings, centering around her rather strange house rules, one of which is don't talk to the neighbours at number 6. And also the fact that the last lodger died in somewhat tragic circumstances. So he can't resist the offer despite all of that, because it's just an amazing house. It's too good to be true. But very soon it becomes clear to Sebastian that both he and Adriana are being watched, and he doesn't know what the watcher wants or how far they'll go to get it, but he's pretty sure as time goes on that it might be related to Adriana's past, particularly her childhood, which she's very reticent to talk about, but also which might explain her rather strange rules and the fact that she keeps the house like a fortress. She's very security conscious. So yeah, it's very tense, it's very twisty, pretty creepy at times. Yeah, I really enjoyed writing it.
As I say, that sounds really intriguing, especially as well when it's like, don't talk to the people at number 6. To me, that's almost, I really now need to speak to the people at number 6. It's a bit like, you know, don't press this button. It's in the back of my head. It's now, you become obsessed a bit with that, don't you?
Yeah. And the house is called Serenity House. So that's another reason he takes it, because he thinks this, you know, is that an omen? You know, I'm going to find peace here. I'm going to find the answers I want. But obviously, as the reader's thinking, this is a thriller. We know that's not going to work out. So yeah, that was my intention. And it's obviously set in Hampstead, which I chose for various reasons. I mean, obviously, Hampstead is a very literary area. It's known for having literary greats past and present living there, but I thought it would provide that sense of dramatic irony because of course it's meant to be one of the most affluent, pretty, beautiful areas of London where you should feel very safe, but obviously it turns out to be anything but for Seb and Adriana, and obviously they're in this beautiful house but feel incredibly claustrophobic because of the darkness that's penetrating the house. So that was another reason I chose that area.
And so where did you get your idea for this novel from?
What's great about the psychological thriller is the fact that they sort of take ordinary people in very ordinary, typical situations. You know, all my books so far have been about sort of friendship. I've had women at the gym, I've had motherhood. And I thought, you know, what's something a bit different, something that we can all relate to? Because I think it's the relatability of the psychological thriller that really makes it so popular. And, you know, I've been a tenant many times, you know, I think most people have, maybe at once in their lives, and some people have been landlords. So I wanted to take that concept and take it down a dark route. And I also thought, you know, what's really good about this setup is the fact that they're strangers to each other, really. I mean, apart from what you find out on the credit check or, you know, what you can find out online, you don't know these people. You are a stranger to them. You don't know what they're hiding. You don't know what dark secrets they've got or anything. So I thought that would really suit what you're looking for in this genre, which is that kind of sense of unease, dread, suspicion. So that was why I chose that. But I married it with this whole idea of being watched and the fact that in today's society, you know, with surveillance, Big Brother, we put our lives on social media, you know, we don't know what weirdos are out there, you know, spying on us. And I thought that would be really interesting to marry those two concepts together of sort of the watcher idea and the landlord and tenant. So that's where my inspiration came from.
And did it turn out how you envisaged it would? Did you get taken down some slightly twisty-turny roads that you yourself weren't expecting when you started out?
All my books take me down a twisty roads, and everyone's really surprised because all my books are quite complicated, and everyone always says to me, you must have diagrams and spreadsheets and whiteboards, and I'm really not like that at all. I have a vague sort of beginning, middle, end. I know what my main twist is going to be, and then I will go off road for chunks of the story, and some things did occur to me as I wrote, and they surprised me and they made the book better. The end was how I wanted it to be, mainly. I can't tell you why, because unless you've read it, you won't sort of get it in terms of the ultimate culprit. But it was how I envisaged it ending, but it did take lots of different routes as I went on, and which hopefully made it a better book, because that's the way I always write. That's just me, and I quite enjoy that. It's quite thrilling when you come up with something new or that added twist that you hadn't thought about at the beginning, but which sort of takes it up a notch.
It kind of percolates sometimes, doesn't it? And do you ever spook yourself? I know that sounds like maybe a strange question, but you know, because it sounds like you get so immersed. Do you ever sometimes freak yourself out or get a little bit spooked by what you're actually writing?
Yeah, I mean, my agent always says to me, I don't know where you get your darkness from. But yeah, sometimes, I suppose. But I think, I don't know, because I know I'm writing fiction and these aren't real people, they aren't real scenarios, I think what I find more unnerving sometimes is when I do research into a particular particular, say a particular sort of affliction that my character might suffer from, or a disorder or something like that. And when you read real life stories about things that have happened to people, I find that quite, that gets to me sometimes. But with my own books, because I know I'm creating this and it's my creation, I suppose, I can switch off, when I've stopped writing.
Absolutely, you still have that control. Excellent.
Definitely.
I know that's given us a brilliant flavour, and I know for one, I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of that. That sounds brilliant. But could you tell us an idea of what's next for you, or what are you working on at the moment?
Well, I've finished another book for Hera, which is out next summer. That takes another typical sort of scenario. It's set in a primary school, and it's about a young single mother who's actually found dead on the riverbank in Kingston the morning after their Christmas parent social. And all my books, I try to write them quite differently. I try to mix it up. I don't like to follow the same formula every time. So the book is actually half written through the police inspector's eyes as he goes about the investigation, as he goes about interviewing the various women, various suspects. But it also goes back to when the character Lola, who's the mum who's been found dead, when she first joins the school with her son, and the lead up to that night at the party and what happens. And again, as with all my books, it's very twisty, and there's a big twist at the end. So I'm quite excited about it. Again, I've tried to do something different, as I said, and because the sort of school thing's been done quite a lot, and I tried to make a different spin on this with this book.
No, it sounds really good. Perfect. No, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Alex. And we're really looking forward to hearing you read at our festival in November.
So that was Caitlin Davies and A.A. Chaudhuri talking to Anne-Marie. You'll be able to hear both Caitlin and Alex at Medway River Lit on Saturday the 16th of November. Now, the final person we spoke to for today's podcast is Robyn Goldsmith, Culture Development Manager at Medway Council.
It's been an absolute pleasure to work with and support and partner Wordsmithery with the River Lit Festival. I think it's been lovely to watch your work grow, and I've seen how you've developed as an organisation. I know that River Lit is going to continue to grow and expand over the future years, and that is really down to your own hard work and determination as an organisation. The way our partnership has worked out is really reflective of the way that the council likes to develop culture and work with our local creative sector. You've needed less and less support each year as you've grown within your own organisation, grown your ambition, and you're the experts. You bring an expertise to programming such a thing as River Lit. That's precisely why, as a council, we should be working in partnership with the experts. And that's been the biggest turnaround, really, I think I've seen in Medway since the new cultural strategy was launched, Creative Medway. It puts artists and creatives in the driving seat for cultural projects like this. So you need us less and less. But obviously that support remains. We're still here to kind of pump up your tyres and contribute to your petrol tank before you set out on your own journey. I think River Lit and Wordsmithery as an organisation, you're a really important part of the cultural landscape for Medway. Because for one, you are sort of the embodiment of how partnership with the council can help an organisation grow and develop. But also, I know from feedback from other people in the sector that you're an important part of that local cultural landscape. The way that you connect to other people's festivals and events is incredible. So I'm really proud to see how you've grown. I'm really proud that River Lit is now establishing itself as a new festival for Medway.
Thanks, Robyn. We really do appreciate the faith the council's put in us. And we're really happy to be a part of the cultural landscape in Medway. Not to mention the physical landscape. How's that for a link to today's moment of greenery?
Today's moment of greenery. Many people take part in No Mow May, but why not grow wildflowers in your garden all year round for pollinators? You could even make a wildflower window box or planter.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you to our guests Robyn Goldsmith, Caitlin Davies and A.A. Chaudhuri. This podcast was produced by Sam Hall and hosted by me, Barry Fentiman Hall, and Anne-Marie Jordan. Thanks to our sponsors, Your Paper Quest and Medway Council. And also many thanks to Stuart Turner for letting us use Chatham Town from his 2016 album Abdication House. Find out more about Medway River Lit on our website www.medwayriverlit.co.uk. That's www.medwayriverlit.co.uk. Follow Instagram, Medway River Lit 2024, and Facebook, just plain old Medway River Lit. You can hear more podcasts on our Wordsmithery SoundCloud page. So, the river is lit. Thanks for listening.